Hello, valued viewers. I hope you are all doing very well. Today's poll question is, in the early part of World War II, you are a railroad head, and if you were allowed to have a choice, would you have stayed with current or on-the-board steam locomotive designs or gone with the early diesels? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, so the B&O Railroad was one of those railroads who actually didn't want to continue on with the steam program as they were already in the process of dieselization. But with the United States entry into World War II, not only was the U.S. military not prepared for wartime events, but so were the railroads not prepared for wartime events. And most of the railroads are left scrambling, trying to come up with additional motive power. And besides that, the Wartime Production Board also prohibited any railroad from further dieselization and going away from steam, simply because of the metals and materials required were needed elsewhere for the war effort. So needless to say, the B&O Railroad didn't want anything more to do with the steam locomotive designs, let alone a Yellowstone or an Allegheny or any of the superpower that came to be during the 40s when it comes to steam. So having been forced to return to steam designs, I found it kind of curious on the B&O's part as to why they selected the 2884 Yellowstone EM-1 design over what the Chesapeake and Ohio was running with the 2666 Allegheny, simply because the type of hulls and trains that the B&O had to move during that time frame was pretty equal to, let's say, Norfolk and Westerns and the Chesapeake and Ohio's consist of materials that they were moving. So when you had a locomotive like an Allegheny on, by Lima on the drawing boards, I'm just curious as to why B&O didn't select the Allegheny over the Yellowstone, simply because of the might that the Alleghenies possess as far as hauling. Because often the B&O had to double head their ore in coal trains with these Yellowstones, and also provide a third on the back end to push some of these consist of coal and raw material trains. So from an economic point of view, it seems to me that going with an Allegheny would have been the cheaper means. So let me know in the comments below if my thinking on this is incorrect. Okay, so to give you all an idea of what kind of grades and runs that the B&O had to make with these EM-1 Yellowstones, the B&O had no less than 4 major mountains to cross west of Cumberland, Maryland, which is in the lower Appalachian mountain range and over some of the Allegheny mountains as well. And these weren't short runs either, as far as being on the grades, which averaged between 2 and 3% grades between 10 and 18 miles that I can say conservatively. So having to make these kind of runs with the EM-1 Yellowstones is why I'm kind of scratching my head as to why the B&O didn't purchase the Allegheny locomotives, if not for any other reason that they could just simply eliminate having to use one additional locomotive besides the 2 to 3 Yellowstones that they were having to use. And not only that, the Baltimore and Ohio EM-1 Yellowstones are not the most powerful of the Yellowstone designs to begin with. But I can say that they were exceptionally built machines, and generally speaking, they were well liked by the train crews as well. So given that the Baltimore and Ohio didn't have a choice and had to use steam locomotive designs, they went to Baldwin and ordered 30 of the EM-1 2884 Yellowstones. And like most late era designs, when it comes to steam locomotives, the B&O Yellowstone saw less than 20 years of service overall, and none of them were preserved. So like the Allegheny, the EM-1 was developed during the very end of the steam era, and accordingly would carry all the latest gadgets and technology available. So as I mentioned, the 30 of the locomotives were built, and they were all built by Baldwin and were delivered to the B&O towards the end of World War II between 1944 and 1945. The B&O EM-1 design was also the lightest of the Yellowstones and also had the lowest boiler pressure in the Yellowstones. However, there was a benefit to this, as there was a higher factor of adhesion at 4.22%, which is a high ratio, and this made it the locomotives far less susceptible to wheel slippage upon startup. And that's a very valuable thing to have when you're running the type of grades that the Baltimore and Ohio was dealing with. In general, the EM-1s hauled general merchandise, large coal drags, and wartime raw materials over these 4 mountain summits that they had to travel along. Near the end of steam, and when the B&O could finally begin to dieselize their entire fleet the way that they originally wanted to, all of the EM-1s were sent out to Fairmont and Wheeling, West Virginia, and Lorain, Ohio, just handling lake-bound coal trains, as well as runs between Willard, Ohio, and Garrett, Indiana. Those runs until the B&O started to retire them in 1957, and all of them were scrapped. And with that, the following specifications apply to the Baltimore and Ohio's EM-1 Yellowstone. The EM-1 produced 115,000 pounds of tractive effort on 64-inch drivers. They had a steam pressure of 235 pounds per square inch. They had 4 24 by 32-inch cylinders. The tender carried 22,000 gallons of water and 25 tons of coal. The locomotive weighed 627,000 pounds. The tender weighed 328,000 pounds for a combined 1,010,700 pounds. The EM-1s were also equipped with the most modern of characteristics of steam locomotives of that time, including Worthington feed water heater, superheaters, which were controlled by a front-end throttle, a cyclone front end, thermic siphons, which is a type of fusible plug, a lateral cushioning device in the front pair of drivers on both engines and front wheels and the trailing truck, as well as roller bearings on all axles. Railroad yard workers gave the EM-1 Yellowstone a nickname called Yard Creepers because 3 of their men could actually pull the locomotive to anywhere they wanted to within the yard with just using a rope. So some other characteristics and specifications of the EM-1 Yellowstone was that the firebox grade area was 117.5 square feet. The fuel type it carried was obviously coal. The adhesive weight was 485,000 pounds, but it also had that fabulous 4.22 factor of adhesion, which allowed for those slip-free startups that would be direly needed on a run, such as the B&O was doing. And finally, the length of the locomotive, along with the tender, was a total of 128 feet and 8 inches, and the height was 16 feet. The width of the locomotive was 11 feet. And with that, we'll wrap up the video, and I will end by saying thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the content today, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. Hit the like button. Both of these features help the channel grow and makes the channel visible to non-subscribers. And also help support our efforts if you can by visiting our print shop at Nickel Plate Limited on Etsy.com. And we thank you once again.